Welcome. This is ACCA F1 class. In this particular session, we are dealing with Chapter 14, Personal Effectiveness and Communication. Personal Effectiveness and Communication. Let's look at the overview of our chapter. Personal effectiveness and communication can be classified into two broad areas. So I'm going to examine the personal strategies and organization systems that relate to personal effectiveness and communication. So let's talk about some of the items that we are going to discuss under personal strategies. Personal strategies to effective communication and personal effectiveness will include things like time management, communication itself, and under communication we'll talk about two major things: the process or methods of communication and the barriers to communication. Under organization systems, we are going to consider things like personal development plans, coaching, counseling, and mentoring, and also the role of information technology in organizations. Having said that, let's start looking at the details. So organization systems, we start by looking at the personal development plan. What is a personal development plan? A personal development plan is an action plan for an individual that incorporates a set of developmental opportunities, including formal training. A systematic approach to personal development planning involves the following steps. Step number 1, select the area for development, select an objective for development, determine how to move towards that objectives and achieve the objective. Also formulate a detailed action, secure agreement to action plan, implement an action plan. Now, when you set objectives, the objectives must be SMART. That acronym SMART is a very important word. So SMART stands for your objectives must be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So how can we improve work organizations? Work organization can be improved by considering three things. Number 1, the use of the ABCD method of trail management. Number 2, by organizing your work in batches. Number 3, by taking advantage of your natural work patterns. So what is the ABCD method of trail management? The ABCD is just used as letters that represents the following. A represents act on it immediately. So when there is something that needs to be done, good management would be, as long as it is necessary, as long as it is relevant and needs to be done, it must be done almost immediately. Then for those activities that are unnecessary and irrelevant, you can put them aside. That's what B represents. Bin it, put it aside if it is unnecessary or irrelevant. This is important so that managers can only focus on things that are necessary and things that are relevant. C in the ABCD stands for create a plan for when and how you will deal with it. So as you create plan, you must be looking at when and how. When and how. That's why your objectives must be timely. D means that what you cannot do as a manager, because you've got so many things to look at, those things you cannot do and less sensitive, you can delegate to someone else. By delegating as a manager, you are freeing up time so that you can focus on the most important things. What's the role of information technology? Information technology has significantly changed the way in which we work and communicate. There are now virtual offices. There are now situations where people are working from home because of technology. So technologies which continue to evolve and affect communication and the way we work includes the use of modems now and the digital transmissions, mobile phones, laptops, computer, telephone integration, the voicemail use of emails, and also internet access. So these are some of the technologies that has continued to evolve and affect the way we work and the way we communicate. So let me talk about the last part under organization systems, that is coaching, counseling, and mentoring. So what's the difference between these three terminologies: coaching, mentoring, and counseling? Coaching, mentoring, and counseling. Let's define who a coach is. A coach is an experienced employee who provides targeted guidance to the trainee accountants or trainee employees. Who is a mentor? A mentor is one who provides long-term career support and development to new employees or trainee employees. So you expect that with mentorship, there is supposed to be a long-term kind of relationship. Finally, on counseling, who is a counselor? A counselor is one who helps the trainee, accountant, or employee to help himself or herself. A counselor provides guidance that enables the employee to help himself or herself. So let's explain the details in relation to coaching, mentoring, and counseling. Coaching. So coaching is where a trainee is put under the guidance of an experienced employee. For coaching to be successful, the following steps must be appropriated or appreciated. Number one, there should be establishment of learning targets. Number two, plan systematic learning and development programs. Number three, identify opportunities to broaden trainees' knowledge and experience. And number four, allow the trainees' strengths and weaknesses to be exposed. Number five, exchange feedback. So that's what coaching is all about, and those are the steps that can make coaching successful. Let's look at mentoring. Mentoring requires a long-term relationship. It is different from coaching in the way that mentoring covers a wider range of issues and concerns. Coaching is dealing with specific issues. Let's move on and look at counseling finally. Counseling should be performed by a trained person on a professional basis to resolve problems or issues in the workplace. And for counseling to be successful, there should be the following factors that should be considered. Number one, motivation. Number two, management. And number three, relationship. Because counseling is all about developing a relationship with the person you are counseling. Effective counseling is important because it motivates individuals, reduces conflicts in departments, and aids management's understanding of issues. So those are some of the things that counseling is able to do. Now, in counseling, there are three key stages in counseling. Stage number one is the recognition and understanding of the problem you're dealing with. Key number two is the empowering of the person you are counseling to find the solutions. A counselor does not necessarily provide solutions, but helps the counselee to find the solutions to the problem. So, number one, you have understood the problem, you've recognized the problem, and you have also made the person you are counseling to understand and recognize the problem that exists. Now, remember what we have said about counseling. Counseling is all about helping the other person help himself or herself. So, number two, you are just empowering the person you are counseling to find solutions to the identified problems and the problems that have been understood. And then the third one, which is the last one, is to ensure that the counselee is able to resource out or source out solutions. So managers should help employees to recognize and deal with issues rather than merely to provide a solution for them. Now remember, we've always said that this course in particular is meant at training managers, developing managers. So managers, you as a manager, you must be able to help people you are working with, your employees, to recognize and deal with issues on themselves rather than simply providing solutions for them. So those are the aspects that relate to organization strategies. Now let's look at organization systems. Now let's look at the issues pertaining to personal strategies. Under personal strategies, I've said we'll look at time management. So let's look at time management as the first item. What is time management? Time management is the process of allocating time to tasks in the most effective manner, making the best use of the time that you have. No one has got more time. Every one of us has got the same number of hours granted to us. But to be effective in life, you need to make the most use of your time, the best use of your time. So how can you use time better? How can you make the best use of your time? You need to set goals that are smart, goals that are specific, goals that are measurable, goals that are attainable, goals that are realistic, and goals that are time bound. Two aspects from the SMART acronym, measurable and time bound goals, are very important to effective time management. So if we are thinking of making the best use of time, be able to measure goals and also set time in which to achieve the set goals. Let's look at communication. Communication in the workplace. Communication should be a two-way process within the formal organization structure, and the two different types of communication is vertical and horizontal. So vertical communication flows through the hierarchy in the organization. That can either be an upward communication or downward communication. Upward communication is where juniors are communicating to the superiors. That can be done in form of giving reports. Downward communication is where the superiors are communicating to the juniors. That can be in the form of giving instructions. Horizontal communication takes place between individuals who are at the same level or colleagues. So when colleagues communicate, we call that horizontal communication. Communication methods can be oral or written communication, oral communication or written communication. Either you are communicating directly by calling or having a conversation, or you are communicating using written methods. That could be you are writing a report, a letter, a memo, or you are writing an email. Those are the two different methods of communication, or categories of the methods of communication. Now let's look at the communication process. Communication process. We've said communication is a two-way process, meaning that there is a sender of information and the receiver of information on the other side. So the sender of the information develops a thought to communicate and encodes it and finds the transmission method for the communication. or method of communicating. So if you are the sender or communicator, first of all, you developed a thought, encoded the thought into a message, and you had to look for ways of transmitting that message to the receiver. This is why you need to decide on the method of communication to use. Are you going to use oral communication, or it is going to be written communication? Now, on the other side, you have the receiver of this information, who must receive the information, then decodes the information to get the understanding or the interpretation of what that message means. So by receiving the receiving the message, decoding the message, somebody will be able to develop the understanding of the meaning of the message they have received. Now, between these two people or persons that are involved in communication, the sender and the receiver, in between there are transmission methods for this message or communication. Something that can happen is there could be distortions in the process of communication. We call these as noise or barriers to communication. Barriers to communication. So barriers to communication can either be physical noise that may disturb the receiver from understanding the message that is being communicated to, or it could be jargons, the use of big words that the receiver cannot be able to understand. So when you use too much jargons in your communication, then there is a distortion, because the receiver of the information is not able to get the true interpretation or understanding of what you are communicating. The other distortions in communication or barriers to communication can be poor explanation. If the communication process or if the message is not clearly explained, then the receiver will find it difficult to understand what you are communicating. The other barrier to communication could be emotions. If people attach emotions to what they are communicating, they tend to misinterpret the messages, and distortions happens there. The last barrier to communication could be the failure to listen by the receiver. The receiver fails to listen to what you are communicating. So in the process of communication, when the message is sent to the receiver, there are these barriers to communication that may happen. So both the receiver and the sender of the message must be working on how to overcome some of these barriers, so that the message reaches the intended person and the intended person gets the exact meaning that the sender had in mind when constructing the message. At the end of the day, the sender needs to get feedback from the receiver of the message in order for the sender to also know that the message has been received and the message has been correctly interpreted. So let's talk about the 5 C's of good communication. The 5 C's of good communication. So what are the 5 C's of good communication? Number 1 is your communication must be concise, precise, concise. The message must be complete. The message must be correct. The message must have courtesy in it. The message must be as clear as possible. So those are some of the 5 C's. Those are the 5 C's of communication, of good communication, or qualities of good communication. Now, as managers, we need to have good interpersonal skills when it comes to communication. Good interpersonal skills. A manager must be able to have good interpersonal skills. The ability to be able to interact with others without having challenges. So that's brings us to the end of the chapter 14. Those things I've just highlighted are the most important things you need to understand in this chapter. And so as we have looked at this chapter 14, we need to be able to appreciate that we have learned and understood the communication process and how individuals can improve their personal effectiveness, quoting things like time management and the other things that we have talked about. Thank you.